Yes, 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 yes. It is 7 o'clock. It was 6:59. Then, as is now, I'm feeling fine. Yes, indeed, it's 7 o'clock, not 7:01. Let's sit down and have some fun with me, Malcolm Tent, on this episode of Tent Talks Tunes, the home of great alliteration, as you might have just noticed. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Allow me to clear my throat for a second. Hello to Matt, the first guy to check in and say hey. We all know that Matt's got great taste, not just because he's tuned in here, but because he's tuned in here. How's that for a double whammy? Oh, yes, indeed. I would hope everybody noticed the opening card. Look at that art. That's art by a guy named Frank Oblak from Cleveland, Ohio. And that is the front cover of the brand new album by They Hate Us, featuring me, Malcolm Tent. Hello, Billy Death. Thanks for tuning in, dude. Yeah, me, Malcolm Tent. Look, there's a picture of me playing my pink princess guitar live on stage with Pee Duvet, the lead singer of the Murder Junkies, and Dino Sex, the beloved naked drummer of the Murder Junkies. That's me playing the aforementioned pink guitar. And that's Naughty Fred Dahmer from RBNX. That's They Hate Us. We are a super group, and this is our new album. I said our new album, Get Back in the House. I know it's been very, very hip and trendy for the past few months to go around telling everybody to stay at home. But I want everybody to know we came up with this concept over a year ago. We make the trends. We were the first to tell you to get back in the house. Okay? And to come up with a drawing illustrating the concept. So not only is it 12 or 13 songs of pure punk rock, it's socially relevant and it's got great artwork. It's available on the fabulous Mystery School label. That's Mystery School Records from Wilmington, North Carolina. And needless to say, I recommend it. Good stuff. Even if I weren't in this band, this would be good stuff. It's been a pretty good mail week. You know, I'm a greedy son of a bitch. Greedy son of a bitch. I like people to send me stuff in the mail. I always thoughtfully provide you with my address, which you can see is right there. Malcolm Tent, P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. I don't expect one-way love. I'm happy to send something back to you in return. This is the latest issue of The Auger from New Haven, Connecticut. This magazine, I love this. Not only is it a genuine print zine, and I think it's free, but it's just got this completely wacky, eccentric sense of humor where you can never really tell if they're serious or not. And if they're not being serious, is it funny? You go like this a lot when you're reading The Auger, and I like that. I like that an awful lot. So I want to thank the people from The Auger for sending the latest issue of their fine tome. I'll be sending something back to them in exchange once I can figure it out what it is going to be. They also sent this really awesome tag, which I'm going to be a complete pest and stick it somewhere where nobody wants to see it. Like on the front door of the supermarket or on a public bus seat. Someone's going to know that MT was there, whether they care or not. Also got a postcard. Look at that. A postcard from my friends Don and Rachel out in Tucson, Arizona. That's a great postcard. Hope you guys can see it. Basically, it's called Dance of the Skeletons by a wonderful Mexican artist whose name I can't read because I don't have my glasses on. But they sent it right there to me, Malcolm Tent, P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. Okay, before I get rolling, I am going to get my glasses because I'm going to need them as time goes on. Because today we're going to talk about records that never got the love they deserved. And that, I mean, you could open up an entire record store and stock it with nothing but records that never got the love that they richly deserved. You could have your own Library of Congress full of these things. And I'm very particular to those because I've always been a champion of the underdog. I'm always the one to root for, you know, the lineup of the band that nobody loves, the record that got ignored, you know, stuff like that. Stuff that has merit but never got the stamp approval of the official tastemakers that tell you what's good, the ones that have been telling you since day one that Eric Clapton is God. That kind of horse hockey. No, 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 no. We're going to talk about bands right now who will never make it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but if there's any justice whatsoever, Eric Clapton would be shining these guys' shoes. You know what I mean? Jimmy Page would be washing the windows of the homes of these bands. Jan Wenner, note the pronunciation on that, Jan Wenner would be writing press releases for these bands we're going to talk about for the next hour if there was any justice in the world. But since we know there isn't any, not in that world, here in this world, we're going to dispense the justice liberally. Okay, first band that I discovered, well, in today's list anyway, the first band by that had a record that never got nearly enough love came about because of my absolute obsession with this group you've all heard of. I'm talking about Kiss. Yes, Kiss. Kiss Dynasty. My copy's got a couple of original tickets taped to the back. No, I never got to see Kiss back in the day. That's a long, painful story of reneged promises, which maybe one day I'll talk about. But you know how it is. You've got the internet at your disposal. Maybe if you're like me, you've got a whole shelf of books in your living room at your disposal. And every now and again, I like to start digging into the rabbit hole and going through the labyrinth of information about bands I really love. So I was on a Kiss expedition for information. I was on a Kiss data mining expedition. And somewhere, somehow, I came across this album. And I'd seen this album a lot. This album was mentioned on a Kiss fan site because, as some of you may know if you're rabid Kiss fans, there was an original prototype version of Kiss called Wicked Lester. And Wicked Lester actually was signed to Epic Records in 1972, I believe, and went so far as recording an album, getting a catalog number, having it mixed and then remixed, and a cover made for it. They got right down the path, just on the verge of having a Wicked Lester album released, when they pulled the plug on it because Gene and Paul didn't like the project. It really wasn't what they wanted to do. It didn't reflect their vision. They decided not to do the Wicked Lester album. So they pulled the plug on it. It never came out. Gene and Paul bought the rights to the masters, and there they have sat on the shelf basically ever since. But one thing that they did not get the rights to was the art for the front cover. And something I've talked about on other episodes is how when you sign a standard major label recording contract, they quite often are all too happy to assign you a staff producer, staff engineer, and artwork from the generic stock of artwork that they have at the label. The record labels, typically when they have a new band, will say, okay, your album's coming out. Here are some album covers you can choose from. Pick one. You know? Or the graphics department will say, okay, you're called Wicked Lester. We've got this idea for cover art. We've already made it for you. Here it is. Like it? We don't care. This is going to be the album cover. And the cover for the Wicked Lester album was this. Right there. That was the cover for the unreleased album featuring Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley of Kiss from 1971-72. And when I saw that on the fan website, I was like, wait a minute, I've seen this album a lot. I am well familiar with this cover. I've seen this cover all over the place in the dollar bins. Usually the dollar bin of the record store, the dollar bin of the record swap meet, wherever. It's one of those albums that was just always in the dollar bin. And it was by a band called The Laughing Dogs. You know, you'd see this Laughing Dogs record all over the place. And I'm like, wow, no way. This was actually going to be the cover for the Wicked Lester record. Cool. So I vowed that the next time I saw the Laughing Dogs record in the dollar bin, I'd pick one up. Sure enough, it didn't take very long. Picked it up, filed it away, under the Kiss section, of course, and pretty much forgot about it. So you fast forward a few years to where I started doing live radio down on WNHU West Haven, which of course I'm not doing now because of the new normal where you're not allowed to do radio. We're waiting for the old normal to come back so I will be allowed to go into the radio station and broadcast. Patiently waiting. So it comes to the point where I'm doing live radio, and, you know, I can't play 2 hours worth of Kiss every single week, much as I might be tempted to. You got to play new stuff. You got to keep the people engaged. So I started going through the record bins in my library and picking out stuff, records I never listened to, and I came across the Laughing Dogs record and said, all right, let's give it a listen. What the hell, right? Man, paint me white and call me a cracker, but if this wasn't a damn good record. This is a real good record. This is an excellent record. This is a prime slab, prime cut of late 70s power pop. Okay, it came out in 1979. And you got to remember, 1979 was the year of the Knack. And there were also echoes of Graham Parker and the Rumor and Elvis Costello. You know, Tom Petty was just starting to plow the field. So all this stuff is in the air. And, you know, as happens with the major labels, there was a feeding frenzy for bands like that. And somehow Columbia/Epic came up with the Laughing Dogs. And the Laughing Dogs, I think, were kind of cursed from the very beginning because they were kind of part of a couple of different scenes, but not really a part of either scene. And so they never really hit anywhere, you know. They were basically, and I had the chance to interview their lead singer, James Leonard, on my radio show a bunch of years ago. And the story, as he told it to me, was that they were originally from New Jersey, and I guess relocated to Brooklyn, and were completely frustrated because they wanted to play original music, which at the time was impossible because either you were a cover band playing local bars, or you were a giant arena rock, stadium rock band. If you were on the bar level and wanted to play original music, you were screwed. There was literally nowhere to do it. So these guys are out there, you know, in New Jersey and or Brooklyn, trying to find a place to play original music, and they somehow came across the CBGB. They stumbled upon the CBGB scene, ended up getting gigs there. Apparently Tom Verlaine from television endorsed them, and they were able to start playing original music at CBGB. The problem is they didn't start doing music at CBGB until about 1977, I think, 77, 78. And by then, the original A-list wave of CBGB bands had already outgrown CBGB. You know, the ones that you read about and hear about everywhere. Television, Talking Heads, Blondie, Patti Smith, you know, the usual suspects. They had already come and gone. And so the second wave of bands started playing CBGB, and they were, I'm going to dare say, pardon my French, B-list bands. And I know these bands have their fans, I know a lot of these bands have their adherents, but to my jaundiced ear, I just don't hear the sparkle that the A-list bands had. Like, you know, the B-list bands being like the Miamis, the Shirts, Mink DeVille, Helen Wheels Band. You know, they're not bad. They just don't have that that it takes. And the Laughing Dogs ended up being a part of that entire second wave. CBs were just a little bit too late. In fact, they're on the ill-fated Live at CBGB double album that has a lot of those bands on it. Record never sold. It was kind of the kiss of death for a lot of bands. So the Laughing Dogs were on the wrong side of the river and a little bit too late for the real, authentic CBGB style of punk rock. On the other hand, when their album finally came out in 1979, it was kind of lost in this sea of bands that had just gotten signed in the wake of the Knack. You know, the Romantics being one who actually had a hit, but a lot of the others, I could think of guys like Dwight Twilley, maybe Donnie Iris, tons of people like that, you know, who actually were really good, but just kind of got lost in the shuffle. And it's a real shame because this record, I think, is power pop at its finest. I think pound for pound, song for song, this song kicks Get the Knack all over the damn block and then back down the street. Okay, obviously My Sharona is My Sharona, but in terms of albums, Laughing Dogs album whips Get the Knack with a studded leather belt. A lot of people accused of the Knack of being Beatles ripoffs or Beatles wannabes. I think the true recipients of that, and I'm not saying that as an insult in the slightest bit, of that accolade would be the Laughing Dogs. This record's got Beatles all over it, but these guys do the Beatles ripoff with so much intelligence and so much taste and so much knowledge, like really deep, deep knowledge of how a Beatles song is constructed. You listen to these things and you'll hear a chord or a vocal harmony or a chord change or a hook somewhere, and you're like, yeah, Beatles, but so tastefully done. And this album does have one genuine, honest-to-God, bona fide, proto-post, whatever you want to call it, punk rock anthem. It's called I Need a Million. That song, man, if it doesn't kick your ass, you haven't got an ass. If it doesn't kick your ass, you lack legs. I Need a Million by the Laughing Dogs. Man, never mind songs like No Lies and Get 'Em Out of Town and I'm Awake and Reason for Love. This is power pop, kids. I think if there had been any justice in the world at all, this album would have been Get the Knack. If it had been released maybe a year earlier, and they'd been on the right side of the river, who knows? Who knows? But it's a classic example, I think, of time and place and being there when the genre is created rather than being there after the genre's already been created and people are sick to death of it. Laughing Dogs, man, should have been contenders. For the longest time, I thought that this was the only album, that's the back of it, I thought this was the only album by the Laughing Dogs. It was the only one I ever saw. And imagine my shock and awe when I was digging through, you guessed it, the dollar bin, and I found another record by the Laughing Dogs, Meet Their Makers. Came out a year later, if I have that correctly. Yeah, came out in 1980, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm not going to sit here and condemn it with faint praise. I think its biggest problem is that it's got the mark of record label interference all over it. And that's a theme that we're unfortunately going to revisit a couple of times during today's little broadcast. Everything from the completely stock album cover graphics, even though it's a great title and a great concept, you can tell that the Columbia Records graphics department put this thing together. I think it's a house producer who does it, a guy named Peter Kerr, K-E-R, Peter Kerr. Never heard of the guy. I'm going to imagine he was a Columbia Records in-house producer. Songwriting, I can imagine the scenario where the people at the label said, well, you know, guys, your first album was pretty good. We let you do it your way, but no hits. Now you're going to do it our way. You're going to write love songs. You're going to tone down the sense of humor. You're going to rein in the noise and the distortion. You're going to smooth it out. We're going to go for some radio. the fact that the second song on side one is a cover by Eric Burdon and the Animals kind of gives it away. That's like the oldest gambit in the book. Stick a cover song right there, side one, track two, to try to, give something that the people are familiar with. And there's no need for that. These guys are so good, they don't need to be covering Eric Burdon and the Animals. It's really pointless. So, the label, as they so often do, just kind of threw it out there in the market. I don't know if they promoted it at all. I doubt that they did. And it died, and that was about the end of the Laughing Dogs. Except for the fact that their cover was originally meant for the first Proto-Kiss album, and you can still find their stuff in the cheap bins just about everywhere. I recommend them both. They're both pretty good records, but this one especially. I mean, if you like power pop and you like jangle, and you love like the more underground side of that kind of stuff, like that Trouser Press used to champion and Bomp used to champion, this album by the Laughing Dogs, I love it. When I interviewed James Leonard on my radio show, he was very kind enough to send me a CD of a whole bunch of unreleased Laughing Dogs material called Hidden Bones. I don't know what the deal is with this. I haven't seen it listed on any website or discography anywhere, but it's got a lot of cool stuff on it. I guess they stayed active as much as they could after being dropped by the major. And apparently their drummer, a guy named Mo Potts, lives in Middletown, Connecticut. So Mo, if you're out there, good job, man. Thank you for doing that. James Leonard, if you're out there, salute. I hope that if I'm in Middletown and I meet Mo Potts, I have a Laughing Dogs record so I can get a nice autograph. I would love that very much. So Laughing Dogs, kids, that's one record that never got nearly as much love as it should have. Hope you guys will bear with me while I sip water in front of you. I know it's kind of rude to do that in company, but I'm thirsty. All right, we see some people chiming in. I see, Brandon, Pear from Sweden, Scott Monroe. Okay, Scott Monroe says he actually saw the Laughing Dogs opening for Cheap Trick in 1980 in New Haven. He says the crowd were indifferent. There you go. You send the band out on tour opening for a big famous act. Nobody cares. If they had been able to tour on their own on some kind of a real independent club circuit, I've said it before, I'll say it again, they could have, should have been huge. But that's the business for you. That's the business for you. All the more reason to avoid the major labels. I hate the major labels. I always have. I don't foresee any time when I will not utterly despise the major labels. Not only because they're greedy sons of bitches, but because they ruin careers. Pardon my profanity for 1 second. Fuck the goddamn major labels. There, I said it. Alright. I'm going to calm down now. I'm going to regain my cool. And we're going to talk about another rabbit hole that I went down. Yes, another rabbit hole that led to some really, really interesting discoveries and some really cool music. David Bowie. David Bowie. I would be hard-pressed to find somebody who doesn't love David Bowie, or at least like David Bowie. Of course, now, this is where people are going to chime in saying they don't like David Bowie. That's fine. You go for it. I know people who don't like the Beatles. Hey, whatever floats your boat, dude. I love them. You don't have to like them. I love David Bowie. So, there you go. I'm on another one of my fact-finding missions looking for stuff about David Bowie, reading everything I possibly can. And my love for the eccentric and the weird and the completely unexpected left field stuff, of course, led to reading about David Bowie imitators. During that one moment when David Bowie was truly on top of the world and really did absolutely rule the rock scene, you of course ended up having armies of people trying to look like Bowie, trying to sound like Bowie, trying to be Bowie, essentially. And there actually were a pretty fair number of them. And I think probably one of the most well-known, and one that I love, is, of course, Joe Bryant. Now, I really should do an entire show on Joe Bryant. He only managed to get 2 albums out. And I'm not going to talk about Joe Bryant today. Joe Bryant is a prime example of somebody who really took David Bowie as his starting point and tried to be, if not Bowie, then certainly the next Bowie. He really tried. That is an example for sure. Another name I kept seeing in the Bowie wannabe category was a guy named, I hope you can read this, David Warner. David Warner is a name that always came up in the Bowie wannabe sweepstakes. And, you know, I never heard him, I never heard of him. And this was a long time ago. This might have even been in the day before you could just readily access audio clips and video clips on the internet. YouTube might not have been, you know, the force that it is today. So I had never heard anything by the guy, but I sort of put the name in the trap. And sure enough, going through the dollar bins, I love the dollar bins, I came across this record. David Warner. Okay, this guy is apparently, from what I've read, a Bowie wannabe. Let's check it out. It's got pretty cool new wave cover, new wave graphics. It's got his torso. You got from the neck to the waist on the front. Got the waist to the knees on the back. That's him there. That's him from the neck to the shoulders. And then on the other side, you've got, can't really see that, but his knees and his feet. So you can kind of assemble a partial collage of David Warner by putting the various parts of the album packaging together, but you never get the whole picture. That's the kind of visual punnery I love. I love that kind of stuff. I think they would call that as being clever, very clever, when you work that kind of sense of humor into your album packaging. That's pretty neat. So I put this record on, and the first song on there, called Can't Imagine, I could not imagine how good it was. Kind of the same deal as the Laughing Dogs. Power pop par excellence with super tasty production. Super tasty. Ian Hunter from Mott the Hooples involved with this record. Bob Clearmountain is the producer, and he gives the record very, very just clean, powerful production. It's all guitar, bass, drums, the occasional saxophone, vocal harmonies left, right, and center, and it doesn't sound a thing like David Bowie. There's no Bowie on this at all. So I'm not exactly sure what might have come out before this, because this is also, like the Laughing Dogs, 1979, and I'm going to guess that's also why this record probably got lost in the shuffle, because when I hear it, I definitely hear echoes of Tom Petty, Graham Parker, maybe a little Elvis Costello, and I would never actually come out and accuse someone like David Warner of ripping those people off, but, you know, if your voice sounds kind of like Tom Petty, people are inevitably going to make the comparison. So he might have suffered from that. I'm just guessing. He also might have suffered from the record company indifference. They didn't know what to make of this guy when his album didn't sell like the Knack. You know, the marketing strategy was probably completely wrong. They probably sent him out opening for bands. I don't know. But a record this good, I mean, I just can't believe that it completely faded into absolute obscurity. It just vanished. And like most of the records I'm talking about today, you can find it readily, easily. Maybe not for $1, but I will guarantee you, if you look enough and wait enough, you'll find it for $2 or $3. And it's going to be the best $2 or $3 you've spent on that particular day. I wish I had copies for sale so I could sell them to you people, but I don't. I just love this record. David Warner, self-titled, 1979, Epic Records. This record did not get nearly enough love, except here now on Tent Talks Tunes. Woo! Alright, we're on a roll now. Let's get a little more hydration. All this talking makes the larynx ever so slightly raw. I'm going to mention that my birthday is in a couple of weeks. My birthday is on September 23rd. Now, if you're watching this video as it's archived on Facebook, or on my YouTube channel, my birthday may or may not be upcoming. Well, actually, my birthday is always going to be upcoming. My birthday is always going to be September 23rd. And no matter what time of the year you watch it, there's going to be a September 23rd in the future. So remember my birthday, September 23rd. I think what I'm going to do this year is play a live concert via Facebook. Because I haven't played but 2 live shows since all this bourgeois went down in mid-March and everything got shut down. The first one was in an empty studio with no audience. The second one was outdoors with everybody like this, So I'm just totally jonesing to play live, and I think I'm going to do a birthday broadcast on September 23rd. So either mark that on your calendars or take an X-Acto blade and cut that date completely out of your calendar so you don't have to be reminded of it. Either way, it's going to happen. Just saying. It's an idea that just occurred to me. I'm an idea man, in case you hadn't noticed. Another band, another record that never got enough love. Although I kind of wonder now, because when I posted the little itty bitty tiny section of the cover, people said, "Oh my God, the swimming pool cues! We love the swimming pool cues! Yes, swimming pool cues are great! I love the swimming pool cues!" Really? That's cool. There are people who do know and love the swimming pool cues. Man, I love this record. Let me tell you the story of this record and why I know about it. The Deep End by the Swimming Pool Cues. Atlanta, Georgia, 1982, on the fabulous DB Records label. Man, I was listening to Radio Free Living Room on WLRN FM, Miami, Florida. I've given a lot of love to Radio Free Living Room and the crew who put that show together. Eric Moss, Leslie Wimmer, Ted Gottfried, Bill Ashton, Walter Chahowski, Jim Johnson. I'll name check these guys until I can't talk anymore. That radio show was critical to introducing me to music that sticks with me to this very day. And one night on Radio Free Living Room, I heard a song called Big Fat Tractor. You can see it on the track listing right there. My cheapo camera will read it. Big Fat Tractor. In that crucial spot. Side 1, Song 2. The art of sequencing an album is very precise. You got to have a Sockaroony open or a very mellow Sneak Attack opener. And then the second song on side 1's got to be the one that actually just totally grabs the listener and reels them in. You got to hook them with the second track on side 1. And it didn't work with the Laughing Dogs and their cover of the Eric Burdon and the Animals song. The label thought it was going to work. But it works totally with Big Fat Tractor. Side 1, track 2. They played this song on Radio Free Living Room and I was just like, what is this? It's got all the things that I've talked about before already. Tasty guitar work, clean production, extremely left field sense of humor, idiosyncratic vocal delivery. This one's got male and female vocals, kind of like a more harmonious sounding John Doe and Exene. Killer songwriting. I mean, the songs on this album are so well put together, and once again, very intelligent. To use that word again, very intelligent, very deliberately written, very conscious of the fact that they're trying to get a certain effect across, and also very southern. From Atlanta, Georgia, 40 years ago, just had this very southern feel to it, and either you know what I mean or you don't. If you know how to pronounce the word Kudzu, Kudzu, If you know how to pronounce that word correctly, then you know what I'm talking about. And this album totally captures the eccentricity of that southern time and that southern place. And there's not one bad song on this record, you know. Everything from Little Misfit to Stick in My Hand. Going back to Jackson with a stick in my hand. Man, the A-Bomb woke me up. Rat Bait. Rat Bait. Sounds like Captain Beefheart. If you can find the clip of Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band on Saturday Night Live doing Ashtray Heart, Rat Bait. Man, what a great song. Walk Like a Chicken, Black Bug, Overheated, I Like to Take Orders from You. I mean, the song titles alone, dude. The song titles alone should be enough to make a believer out of anybody who likes their music abnormal, but excellent. And it's kind of the same deal. I don't know why the Swimming Pool Cues didn't hit. I mean, from everything that I've been able to glean and understand, DB Records was solidly behind them. DB was a very strong regional label based out of Atlanta. The Swimming Pool Cues did apparently tour an awful lot. Although, and this is another factoid, if anybody knows me, y'all know that I'm a huge collector of live recordings, audios, and videos. I'm the guy at the show aiming a microphone at the stage, keeping a nervous eye out for bouncers. I've never come across a live Swimming Pool Cues video or audio ever. And I've been doing this since 1983. How come there's no live Swimming Pool Cues out there? Internet research team, get on that. If you got links to live Swimming Pool Cues stuff, I want to see it. I want to hear it. If you got a cassette, mail it to me. I want it. P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. I want live Swimming Pool Cues. And I'll be happy to send you something in return if you send me a hard copy of anything by these guys. I love these guys. My guess is that once again the major labels reared their stupid, ugly, malodorous, foamy heads and tanked the Swimming Pool Cues. That's my guess. Because they had this album on DB Records, and a couple of years later, a few years later, they got signed to A&M. Now, I've given big props to A&M in the past. Like A&M Records, during the punk rock and early new wave heyday, put out some awesome stuff with all kinds of, you know, fantastic colored vinyl and picture discs and shaped sleeves and, you know, small hole 45s and box sets and 10-inch records. I mean, A&M for a minute really had something. A&M was so cool. But by the time the Swimming Pool Cues got signed to A&M, I would vouchsafe that the corporate mentality had taken over, and now the Swimming Pool Cues had been fed into the corporate machinery where they were expected to grind out product and sell units. Just to show you how disenchanted I am with those two Swimming Pool Cue albums on A&M, I don't have them. I don't own them. I've listened to them both. I've tried to like them. I can't do it. I just don't hear anything there. It's kind of like what I said earlier about the second Laughing Dogs record. All of the charm was pretty much homogenized out of the band's sound on their A&M records. Whatever corporate machinery it was that ground, we'll say grinded, because I like the word grinded, that grinded, buffed, sanded, polished, de-ticked, de-burred, and just generally buffed all of the rough edges and all of the freshness and originality that I hear on the first album out of the second album. Now, we can't rule out the fact that the band evolved in that direction on their own. You know, I don't know. But I just think that the coincidence of the major label product, and I use that word deliberately, product, being so completely bland compared to what they did before and to what came after, we're going to get there in a minute, it's just too coincidental. It's just too coincidental. And I don't think I said one genuinely coherent sentence at all in the past minute and a half, but I hope my idea got across. If anybody transcribes this, I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of run-on sentences and bad punctuation, but you get what I mean, Jelly Bean. Independent record, wonderful. Major label records, eh. You know, even to the point where on their third album, an album called Blue Tomorrow on A&M Records, they had to recut Big Fat Tractor, which is another major label ploy for the band to recut one of their extremely popular songs from the back catalog and see if the masses will buy it this time. The remade version of Big Fat Tractor just doesn't have what the original did. So there you go, A&M, chewed them up, spit them out, whatever. You can find this record pretty inexpensively. I bought mine for $2.99 in the Woolworth's cutout bin in North Miami Beach, Florida, sometime in the mid-'80s, I think. I don't know if you're going to find it for $1 necessarily, but I think there are adequate copies out there that you should be able to find for a pretty reasonable price. And I reiterate, it's money well spent. I love this band. I think I do have a copy or two of this one for sale. Just saying. But yeah, I don't make any profit from shilling these bands and loving them. I just love them. You know, I really do. So, find it cheap, find it. Now, the good news is that even after the Swimming Pool Q's went through the major label grind, they were able to continue onward, and a few years later ended up doing a 12-inch EP called The Firing Squad for God. They are back on DB Records. This came out in '85. The A-side's awesome. I think the production is a little bit 80s heavy, you know, with the shotgun drums and the gated reverb and whatnot. But it's still a good song. It's got a lot more elan than anything on the two A&M albums. And the B-side's got a few tracks from the original Deep End era, which are as good as anything on this album. So by '85, they still had really good songs in the tank. The cutting edge was back. The originality was back. Great. This is another one that, I don't know if you're going to find this as readily as the Deep End, but there's probably some out there. And again, just sort of came and went. I'm sure in Atlanta it got a lot of props. But out there in that strange, unexciting world beyond Atlanta, it didn't get props. Very sad. And Swimming Pool Q's did one other album. I think this was 2007 on the Bar None label. Maybe it's 2003. I need to get a stronger pair of dollar store glasses. But they did this album called the Royal Academy of Reality. And this is kind of the same deal. I see this one in the dollar CD bins a lot. Pay the dollar for it. This album is so good. If you were to play this album back to back with this album, you'd never guess. You would never guess it was the same band. Because, God help us, by the time this album came out, the Swimming Pool Q's had, dare I say, I hate to use the word, but matured. Alright, they matured. You know, this is what the A&M albums should have sounded like. It's very adult, very grown up. It doesn't have the wacky sense of humor of a song like Rat Bait. It's not as eccentric. It's actually very lush and very huge sounding. It's got beautiful melodies and harmonies. And there's a song on here called The Earth Makes Us Feel Things. It's just Goosebump City, man. Goosebump City whenever I play that one. So same band, completely different sound, but unlike their major label albums, they totally got it right on this one. So yeah, Swimming Pool Q's, another band that has flown completely under the radar for the better part of 40 years, which means there's a lot of good stuff by them that you can get inexpensively. Add that one to the list. I, Malcolm Tent, have been very satisfied with it for a very long time. All right, gang, I got a couple more for you. First, I want to scroll down. I don't want to be a rude host. This isn't going to matter when you watch it on the YouTube channel, but here at this very moment live on Facebook, I want to see who's tuned in, man. I see there's some lively discussion here. A lot of people have a lot of things to say about these records. Yep, there's Stefan. Hello, Stefan. And my BFF Jill from Florida. Hi, guys. Larry and Scott again. Thank you very much. Good to see you guys there. Okay, now this one. This harkens to another one of those magic years I've talked about in the past, 1981. And I hasten to say, and I have to say that when I do these broadcasts and these streams and whatnot, I'm not, and I can't provide Wikipedia style accuracy with every single date and every single location and every single release in proper chronological order. What I'm doing is painting an overall picture of a time and a place and a zeitgeist. All right, so if I say something came out in 1981, it didn't, please don't crucify me. I'm just recalling these things as I remember them and what was in the air at the time. We're talking about the big picture here. We're talking about the dominant paradigm. Look that up in your dictionary and smoke it. So, 81. 81 was a really good year, as 1979 was. You know, 1981 was, I think, the pinnacle of New Wave's power in the marketplace. And just so much good stuff coming out then. At that time, there was another force I haven't talked about yet that introduced me to a lot of really great music that I never would have heard of before. Now, you've heard me name check Cream magazine. I just went gaga over Radio Free Living Room. I've talked about the golden age of new wave radio in South Florida. I think all 4 months of it. But another thing that was really critical for introducing me to new music was the phenomenon of the live radio broadcast, and specifically the syndicated show called King Biscuit Flower Hour. King Biscuit would come on every week for an hour, and it was a live show. And as I learned when I started doing my radio show, you can't just play, like Devo every single week for an hour. You got to play new stuff. You got to play something to fill up that hour. And in the realm of commercial FM radio, as much as I'm sure they wish they could, you can't play Stairway to Heaven on repeat for an hour every week on the King Biscuit show. You have to bring in new content, new material, and that almost unwittingly, unwillingly, or begrudgingly means new bands. So because of that format, and because you have to do an hour every single week, you reach out and you end up showcasing bands that probably would never get airplay on the regular FM playlists. So for that, I say thank Jah for King Biscuit Flower Hour, because one band that they played 1 week in 1981 completely blew my mind. And I had read a little bit about this group in Cream magazine, because Cream would always write about bands that really nobody else wrote about. And they did an article about this black rock band who had a real cutting-edge sense of humor. A real sharp sense of humor. They had songs. I'm going to read some of the song titles that caught my ear. They got one called There Goes the Neighborhood. One called Johnny Sold Out, S-O-U-L-D. A song called KKK. And then other songs like, Dr. Doctor, Angie with 2 G's, Tell the Coach. According to Cream, they played a pretty wicked band of rock and roll with this real sharp sense of humor. And so when it was announced that the Bus Boys were going to be on the King Biscuit Flower Hour, I stayed up late, tape recorder at the ready, because I wanted to hear what these guys sounded like. And it was one of those, oh my God, moments when the broadcast came on and the Busboys started playing in a live broadcast from the Agora in Cleveland, Ohio. I was just like, yeah, this is good. This is real good. Total riff-a-rama, man. It was just like riff after riff with these guys. And also, top shelf musicianship, the aforementioned extremely sharp sense of humor based around being a bunch of black guys playing basically FM style rock and roll, and presentation and everything. I was hooked. Songs were great. The sense of humor appealed to me. You could tell they were a kick-ass live band, and I knew I needed more Busboys. And this album was around a lot at the time. The Busboys, Minimum Wage Rock and Roll. Saw it quite a bit in the record stores when it first came out, 1980, 81-ish. But at the time, I didn't really think about it too much because I had my cassette of their live broadcasts from the King Biscuit Flower Hour. I'd play that, At that time, I was still kind of snobbish about live. At that time, I was convinced that live was always better than the studio album. And I'd had a few bad experiences with live albums, studio albums as opposed to live albums that kind of reinforced that to me. So I never went out and got the album because, I already had my live tape. But time goes on, the years roll by, and as I get a little bit less snobbish about that and indulge my collector's whim and my penchant for digging through the dollar bins, I realize I'm seeing this in the dollar bins all the time. Constantly. Always. Nobody wanted to buy this record. Nobody. I mean, apparently they obviously sold enough at the time for the dollar bins to be well stocked later. In fact, the copy I have is an RCA Music Service pressing. So they got into the record clubs and sold a few there, but did not catch on. Did not catch on. I guess if you've got that much melanin in your skin and your hair looks like that and you're trying to play straight ahead rock and roll, no one's going to know what to make of you. I mean, let's face it, that's the ugly reality of the music business and American consumers in general. They're kind of like the Laughing Dogs. They just didn't fit in anywhere. It wasn't soul music, it was rock and roll. And it was also very intelligent, very well put together, and I said it before, wickedly funny, but not in a way that makes people really comfortable. There's definitely an element of discomfort in a song like KKK. I want to be an American band. I want to join the Ku Klux Klan, play in a rock and roll band. I want to join the Ku Klux Klan. You're like, what? Like, what do you even make of that? I think these guys confuse the hell out of everybody. Loved it. But, much to my very pleasant surprise, coming across this record for $1 and taking it home and listening to it, it was every bit as good as the King Biscuit live broadcast. Just no nonsense, no BS, clean production, guitars, bass, drums, keyboards, funny as hell lyrics, and great arrangements, and once again, should have been stars, should have been a hit. The savage irony, and this goes back to something I've talked about before, they did do a second album on Arista Records. Arista is the label this one's on. Second album on Arista, and just like with the Laughing Dogs and the Swimming Pool Cues, the record label said, okay guys, we did it your way on the first one, didn't sell jack, so now we're going to do it our way. We're going to smooth out all the edges, you're going to sing love songs, you're going to do a cover. Busboys actually did Heart and Soul at least maybe a full year before Huey Lewis and the News had their hit with it. The Busboys did it first, wasn't a hit. You're going to get Earnest and Sincere, you're going to lose a lot of the really kind of sense of humor, and well, maybe you sell some records that way. Well, that was everything that made the Busboys desirable to begin with. I remember, same deal, when that second album, which was called American Worker, came out. That one I actually went out and bought because I love the Busboys so much, and I hadn't heard anything off the second album. Bought the second album, and I was ready to be blown away, and I was just kind of like, very disappointing. Very disappointing. Even in the one or two songs where they tried to be edgy with a sense of humor, it just came across as being kind of dumb. So I was very, very sad about that one. And sometime after that is when Eddie Murphy got a hold of them. And Eddie Murphy really tried hard to give them a push. He got them on Saturday Night Live. He put them in some movie soundtrack he was in or something like that. But for me, by then it was already over because they were playing a very bland version of good time, kick-ass rock and roll. I mean, they did a Budweiser commercial, for God's sake. You know, if you're going to do music that's acceptable for a Budweiser commercial, you're not going to do music that's acceptable to me, Malcolm Tent, the guy who loves the eccentric, the cutting edge, the weird, and the eccentric. Did I say eccentric twice? I don't know. I don't care. As much as I love eccentricity. So the Busboys, once again, sort of came and went in spite of the best efforts of Eddie Murphy. And as a result, you can find this album in many, many places at a very, very reasonable price. And I recommend it. If you like your sense of humor, unsafe, and if you like musicians who walk the edge and lyrics that tell it like it is, with a little bit of a wink, then I definitely recommend this album. Minimum Wage Rock and Roll by the Busboys. There's plenty of them out there. You can find them. It did not get nearly as much love as it should have. I got one more record to talk about. This one's quick and easy. Flock of Seagulls. You know them. You've heard them. All I'm going to say about the Flock of Seagulls is that this album, their second album, and most of their third album, kick ass. And I'm going to leave it at that. Flock rule, okay? Okay. Just one last reminder before I go. I got tons of stuff here. I do make my living by selling records. I invite you to go onto Discogs and look up TPOS. Look me up. Look me up on Discogs and on eBay, TPOS. Discogs is my regular record store where I got a lot of stuff listed. And I'm not the kind of guy who goes directly for the highest price. I like to stick to the medium, low, medium range because I want to sell. I'm not running a damn museum here. And eBay has got a lot of my label stuff on there. So I invite you guys to check me out. And also, you know, YouTube and right here on Facebook and wherever else the internet exists. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in and listening to me rant and rave and ramble and roll on. I'm going to stick around for a while and take a look at comments and what everybody's got to say and get into some conversation because that's my favorite part of this whole thing. And yeah, Lord willing and the creeks don't rise. Keep on remembering, I'm not just a media star, I'm also a fan. So I hope to meet you guys in about 166 hours. Actually make that 167 hours. Until we meet again, this is Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.